Welcome to the Parkinson's Project podcast. The Parkinson's Project seeks to erase the stigma associated with Parkinson's disease while empowering and inspiring those dealing with the affliction to live life to the fullest. The Parkinson's Project aspires to build an engaged, supportive community while examining the journey of living with Parkinson's disease through a positive, empowering perspective. Here is your host of the Parkinson's Project podcast, Tim McNiff.
Hello again, everybody. I'm Tim McNiff, and it's my pleasure to welcome you once again to the Parkinson's Project podcast. The Parkinson's Project seeks to eliminate the stigma that's often associated with the disease and to instead empower and inspire those dealing with the affliction to live life to its fullest. The intent of the Parkinson's Project podcast is to share the stories of the people who are dealing with PD, share best practices from the medical people who are on the front line working to find a cure, and we're going to hear from the advocates, those people who are helping Parkinsonians deal and adapt through diet, exercise, and of course, with love, understanding, and unconditional support. We're going to try to keep our episodes to about 20 to 30 minutes, but if we're in the middle of a compelling conversation, we do reserve the right to extend that conversation to a second episode with the intent of delivering tangible, beneficial content to all of you who engage with us. And we do encourage that engagement with an ultimate goal of putting ourselves out of business when none of us has to talk about Parkinson's disease any longer. And with that, we'd like to welcome today to the Parkinson's Project podcast, Sandra Holten to the Parkinson's Project. Sandy, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Tim.
I do want to say up front that you have given me the permission to call you Sandy, and you are a Neurologic Music Therapy Fellow at Struther's Parkinson Center in suburban Minneapolis, Minnesota. And we're going to get into all of that today. We're talking about music therapy, which I am very much intrigued by, but I want to start here. Not only is April Parkinson's Awareness Month, but you, Sandy, are celebrating a milestone anniversary this month. Can you share what I'm referring to?
Yes, I am. It has been my privilege and pleasure to work here at Struther's Parkinson's Center for 26 years.
Wow, 26 years and no end in sight. I'm not asking. I just couldn't resist.
That's a trick question.
That wasn't on the script, was it?
No, it wasn't on the script. Well, at some point, I will retire. I would prefer if I liked your introduction, Tim, because I would prefer if I was researched out of a job. I've always said that. Hasn't happened yet, but I'm privileged to work here in the meantime.
I can only imagine the changes you've seen, and we're going to talk about that. But I want to start with you. Is being a therapist what you always aspired to do, or how exactly did you get to where you are today?
Mm-hmm. So I think I always, even as a youngster, liked to connect with people. So that's definitely a big part of being a therapist. It was in high school when I went to a college night and saw up on the screen an option for a major as being music therapy. I thought, well, that might make sense for me. And so I pursued that. I went to Augsburg College and I received my Bachelor of Science in music therapy, did my internship at a hospital, Golden Valley Health Center that is no longer in existence, but worked in mental health. And then 26 years ago, landed here at Struther's Parkinson Center. And I've also had training in neurologic music therapy, which is a training and then continued training through the fellowship program, and have gone through that 5 times. Never looked back.
5 times? Because
5 times.
Because of evolutions or developments in the...
It's when you do a fellowship training, not only are you updated on more current research in neurologic music therapy, but also in addition to that, we have to go bringing video of ourselves using 3 of the techniques. And then the folks at the fellowship vote whether you passed or not. So it's great quality control, but also just a fascinating, dynamic way of educating, and you get very specific feedback about what you're doing and how you might do it better. So for patient quality delivery of services, it is just an excellent experience. And I'm thrilled to be able to if I could, I'd just go every year, but we need to do it. I think it's every 5 years.
I think that's great. That you know, and it keeps you pushing, doesn't it? Because you have to keep moving, roll with the changes.
Yep, absolutely.
I can think of applying that model to just about everything. I think all of us should need to do that. Let's make a side note on that. Okay, we'll come back to revisit that on a future podcast. I can only imagine the changes and the innovations that you have seen over a quarter century of working with this music therapy. If someone is listening to us today and they've been newly diagnosed and they're looking for help, why might they want to consider music therapy, or perhaps who might be the ideal candidate?
Well, if we're speaking specifically about Parkinson's, I think that music therapy is something that can be helpful throughout the entire journey of Parkinson's disease. And I think sometimes we look at something like music therapy as being more adjunct or additional, but it can be integral to that process. And it can be something that might address and help with a person's movements, even if they're not appearing to be impacted much. Why not start now with some for example, walking programs and how music might help those, so that you can help to get some of the neuroprotection from that exercise and such, but also looking at how can music be used for self-care. That might be a part of an initial meeting with people. And that's something I do here at Struther's Parkinson Center when I first meet with folks, is talk a bit about how might they use music at home for self-care, as well as how can I, as a music therapy, walk alongside them in their journey.
So before we get into the history of neurologic music therapy, can you expand on kind of what you were just sort of touching on there, the relationship between music, which affects every person differently, with Parkinson's disease, which is the one thing I've heard consistently in my brief experience with Parkinson's, is that it affects every person differently. So what is the common thread or the connecting factor?
Well, you're right. It is definitely something that affects people differently. But what is a definite also is that music can impact every part of our being. Parkinson's can impact every part of a person's being. So that means that the connective tissue is that music has that potential to address a wide variety of needs or goals or areas of disease that might be affecting them through symptoms. So when we think about how we hear music, what do we initially start doing? We start moving, and that's automatic. It's an automatic reaction in our brain. And music does change the brain. When people are scanned, all areas of the brain light up, not only for active music making, but also for music listening. So there's a variety of ways that we can do that. But because we all respond to music differently, that's the other beauty of this, is that with music therapy, I can really tailor an intervention to what's going to be meaningful and helpful for that person, depending on what area they want to work, which maybe impairment they want to address, as well as looking then also their relationship with music and what they would enjoy having as a part of that, or maybe not enjoy, but how will music help them with that work? How will music address that and be something that will actually guide, and not only guide, but influence their therapy.
Now, there are many interesting things going on in the treatment of Parkinson's disease, and that I'm guessing does include music therapy. But as a form of treatment for PD, music therapy has deep roots. How and why did it really get started, at least in this country?
Okay. Well, music therapy itself started back kind of in the late 40s, early 50s, and used with folks who came back from the war with post-traumatic stress disorder, then called shell shock, and has grown with many programs across the country and being used in just a variety of settings. With Parkinson's, if we look at that, there is, in a sense, with the movements being changed, there's maybe a lack of symmetry, lack of rhythm. The rhythms change. They maybe become slower. With rhythm and music, then, we can help those things and in a sense, maybe correct those things and manage those things. Really, the thing that took off as far as neurologic music therapy is the amazing amount of research. If you go to the website nmtacademy.co, you'll see there is just tons of research, a plethora of it. And a lot of it started with people who have neurologic disorders and Parkinson's. And early on in their research, which I'm talking about 1990s-ish time period, early on, they saw that rhythm impacted a person who had Parkinson's, that it helped them walk. And that not only that, other things were corrected. It wasn't just speed of walking, but also, like I said, the symmetry, and also maybe the shuffling decreased. Not maybe it did. I'm talking Minnesotan here, kind of, sort of, maybe. But all of those things were addressed with using music as an immediate stimulus, auditory stimulus. And then they did research that showed that if using a training program over a period of time, people were able to retain the effects of the music, even when it wasn't immediately present, just by recalling the rhythm and recalling the music. So that has great potential. As I said, rhythm and music changes our brain, and it can help us with all sorts of things. And that's where a lot of that early research was. And then that really does translate over into other movements and using kind of that template. When we use it for walking, it's called rhythmic auditory stimulation. And that's used for a function that we have as humans that is already rhythmic. So walking, gait is already rhythmic. And what our brain is actually listening for, they found in the research, is that it's listening for the space between the beat. It's a time reference sort of model. And so using and knowing that and having that knowledge, we're able to access, like I said, that part of the brain, kind of short circuit the areas that are affected by the movement disorder and access that part and have it impact movements for the good. The research has continued and showing how it can be used, music and rhythm can be used to improve voice as well as cognition, attention. All of these things are impacted by Parkinson's. So the research is, like I said, very compelling. And that research, then, the next step, what happened is that there was standardization of some of these techniques. We have, in a sense, names for it, but it goes beyond that. With that standardization, it is definitely research-based, and it's addressed specifically to patients' needs. And that's where neurologic music therapy it did come into being. And now when a person does do the training, they go to that website I mentioned. It's the Academy for Neurologic Music Therapy.
natacademy.co.
Mm-hmm. nmtacademy.co.
NMT Academy.
Mhm.
Forgive me, nmtacademy.co.
Yep.
I
So,
wanna make sure you get that.
Neurologic Music and T Therapy.
Love it. Okay. Well, because music is so personal and everybody likes music, at least to some extent, I would think that this type of therapy would have a broad appeal in the way that perhaps some sports specific, and I don't mean to denigrate any other form of therapy, but I'm just saying that it just has that broad blanket appeal that maybe somebody says, well, maybe I don't want to get in box or whatever it is, maybe that's just not their thing. Is that an accurate statement, or am I perhaps comparing apples and oranges and don't need to go there?
Well, all of the therapies are incredibly important and can be started early on after diagnosis. And I would say that part of it has to do with what is something that motivates a person. People who have tried boxing and get into boxing, it is amazing and helpful. And people who have used tango dance maybe to address some of their symptoms, that is amazing and helpful as well. So I would say that not only are those things helpful and amazing, and physical therapy and occupational therapy and speech therapy are just incredibly important, as well as taking medication as it's been prescribed. All of those things work together. And it's kind of like tools for your tool belt. And anytime you have a project at home, and maybe it's a project that's could be kind of complex, you're going to need a lot of tools. And Parkinson's disease is complex. Like you said, it affects everybody differently. So having these different tools, and we are all different in what we like and don't like. And so what's going to be meaningful and how it might help us is going to be different based on somewhat on our personal likes and dislikes and our personalities and our characteristics. That being said, I do think that music therapy is very helpful through the journey. And it's important to note that how rhythm affects us and impacts us, you don't have to be musical. I've had people say, I am not rhythmic, but we are all rhythmic. Our heart beats rhythmically. We breathe rhythmically. There are so many rhythmic functions in our bodies, our blood pressure, and music can impact that, and rhythm can impact that. There is something called entrainment. So when we hear something that's rhythmic, or there is something rhythmic around us, we respond rhythmically in the same beat. So we're able to use maybe music at 60 beats per minute to help somebody slow down their breathing and slow down their heart rate. Those rhythmic things move and become entrained with each other. And that's the same thing that we're using for walking. We get within a similar range of the rhythm in which a person is walking, and then we use that and maybe up that tempo a bit, or lower it if that's going to work better. And we use research as our guide with that too, as well as our personal experience. So I think, yes, and yes, it can definitely be something that a person might really resonate with, so to speak, but important to realize that you don't have to be musical to benefit from music therapy.
And everybody, despite what they may say about their performance on the dance floor, everyone has rhythm. Well, we had a conversation prior to this interview, and something that you said to me keeps bouncing around in my head, as vacuous as it is. Obviously, it keeps bouncing around in there. You said to me, we use music to accomplish non-musical goals. Can you explain that?
Sure, absolutely. Let's tease that out and wrap that a little bit further. And I thought about that, Tim, and I thought maybe a little bit of a scenario might be helpful. I might have somebody come in who experiences where their feet just don't want to move. It's like they get stuck. We call that freezing. And it might be that it's happening in an area of their house that is maybe a smaller area. Maybe it's a bathroom or around a kitchen counter. And so in a therapy session, I'm going to look at and set up with them, okay, tell me about that area. How can we kind of mock up that area? And then after that, I look at always the non-musical template, so to speak, or example. And so first I'm assessing the situation, then I'm going to look at the non-musical aspects of it and what those goals might be. The therapeutic goal is to help them move around their apartment or their place of living without having the freezing episodes. I may look at those movements and break them down into smaller movements and work on maybe helping with decreasing some of the muscle rigidity through using instrumental targets to help them practice those relevant movements over and over again. I might do some standing exercises like that, and then we might get into more of the walking and the moving through that space, using rhythm, using music to facilitate each of those things. So I'm going to maybe look first at this movement because we need to have our trunk area working, and we might want to decrease that rigidity. So I might have them playing at targets this way. And I might add music. I might add, come gather around people wherever you roam, or whatever it might be. And then I may have them stand up, and we might do some of that side to side weight shift with music. I might create, once we're talking about that specific movement in that specific area, I might create a mnemonic that will help guide them through that area and remind them to make those big movements and keep their feet wider apart so that they can navigate the area in a better way. But definitely always looking at specifically what's relevant for this person, because we can have a wonderful, lovely music therapy session, but if it doesn't have relevance outside of the session, I want that to happen. I want it to impact their everyday life and have improved quality of life through this therapy. Did that make sense?
It makes absolute sense. Absolutely. So when we're talking about music therapy, is this best done one-on-one, or is there instances where perhaps it could be a group experience, or do you combine the two?
Yes. Yes and yes and yes.
Yes, yes, and yes.
Yes.
Next question.
Yeah, we can go to the next question, or I can tease that out a little bit more.
Please.
Definitely what I was just talking
about. My thought is,
about.
I guess, if someone's coming in here and they're just like, yeah, but I'd rather do this myself. I don't want to. Are there benefits to having a shared experience?
Absolutely, there are. This is a disease that can be very isolating. And so shared experiences can really help a person feel not so alone, not so isolated. Certainly, that was one of the things that brought me back from furlough during the pandemic, was how music could reach out and help people not be so isolated. And so if we look at, for example, I have a virtual choir. Now, it's more like a virtual sing-along because we put everyone on mute. If we don't, it would be a cacophony rather than a chorus. So, but that seeing other people and being able to sing together, even though they aren't hearing each other, they're hearing the group leader, and it's something that helps to be able to do things in a group. Not only is Parkinson's isolating, but the power of music is very, very great in a group if you think about it. And it's one of the tenets that we've used for years in music therapy. When we had a therapeutic adult day program, which right now, because of the pandemic, we can't have big groups gather. We do have some other live events that are smaller, but here at Struther's. But back in the day, those folks were very prolific songwriters, just telling you. And being able to express yourself in a group when it's hard to express yourself and take the synthesis of all that information from everyone and everybody's shared experience, that feels affirming. And folks often said that it was like their second family. This isn't just coming to sessions here at Struthers. This is like my second family. So yes, group work can be very helpful, but also there's times when individuals, and that's been something that's been a thrill for me, is to be able to do more individual sessions now, post-pandemic, and also do co-treatments with my rehab colleagues, and being able to really hone in on what that person's specific goal is definitely an advantage that might not happen in a group. So there's a time and place for both.
Last question. Because we always want to make this functional and give people a call to action. So my last question is sort of universal. If you could get a message out to the world asking people to do just one thing where Parkinson's disease is concerned, what would that one thing be?
Tim, I think the one thing that I would say is that it's important for people, and again, I just want a little disclaimer. I don't have Parkinson's. I've been privileged to work here for 26 years. And in those 26 years, what I would say, I would want folks who don't have Parkinson's, as they're looking at how might I help folks or reach out, is that Parkinson's might impact how a person looks or how quickly they think. It might impact their voice, all of those things, and the way they move. However, they are not their disease. They are not Parkinson's personified. They have an identity, and their identity is not touched by the disease. It might sometimes feel that way to them, but they are still who they are. Their essence is still there. And please look beyond the disease and make sure that you are realizing that that remains intact. If you're somebody who's a wait staff at a restaurant, don't look at the person who is with the person who has Parkinson's for their order. Look at them and ask them, which seems like a basic sort of thing, but I can't tell you how many times I've heard stories like that. And I guess I would say that I'd like to quote somebody with whom I worked years ago, and we were working on a piece in our group, and folks were talking about waiting for a cure. And certainly, like I said, I would like to be researched out of this job. Sure. But one of the gentlemen said, but we're not just sitting around waiting. And I'm going to quote him directly. He said, adversity and our faith strengthen our resolve and courage to live on in fullness and optimism. Another gentleman in another group, when I asked folks, what would you want people to know about your experience with Parkinson's? And there was a lot of great answers. But one gentleman said something that created the chorus for the song. And what he said was, they need to know that we still have hope. And the group went on to write that home is where our hope is. Home meaning where they feel safe and where they belong and all of those things. Home is where our hope is. Home is with family and friends. Home is where our hope is, where life and love never end.
Well, it's beautiful. Very nice. What a fitting way to end this particular engagement for the Parkinson's Project. That's the first time we've had singing on the Parkinson's Project. So this is a banner day. You have just raised the bar.
You said you wanted
Beautiful.
something different.
I got it too. I got it. Sandi Holten is a Neurologic Music Therapy Fellow at Struther's Parkinson Center in suburban Minneapolis, Minnesota. You are a treat. Thank you so much. Sandi, thank you for not only joining us here in the Parkinson's Project podcast, but for everything that you have done over the past 26 years and in the future on behalf of Parkinsonians. We thank you.
Thank you.
And don't be a stranger. Like we talked beforehand. You come up with a different angle on this and you want to come back, I'm always here with the light on for you.
Okay. Sounds
All
good.
right. So don't go away. I'll be right back with you in just a moment. I'm going to take you out of the stream as we do. And right now, I just want to point out to you people that the Parkinson's Project, what we seek to do is become a place where you can come for a range of information about PD and to find support for yourself or perhaps for someone who is close to you. We encourage you to please check out the Parkinson's Project Facebook page. You can find the Parkinson's Project podcast wherever you're going to find your favorite podcast. Check us out. And if you would, please rate us so we can continue to grow and continue to support the ongoing effort to eradicate this affliction. And as we said before, and to put ourselves out of business. This has been the Parkinson's Project podcast. For executive producer, Pat Borsia, I'm Tim McNiff. I want to thank you for joining us. And we look forward to meeting each and every one of you and working with you as we seek to build the supportive, empowering community through all prospects and aspects of the Parkinson's Project. Be good, everybody.
Thank you for engaging with the Parkinson's Project podcast. Be sure to look for more content on the Parkinson's Project Facebook page, and we'll see you right here on the next edition of the Parkinson's Project podcast.